Welcome to The Carpenter's Daughter.
The show where we dig into politics, culture, policy, art, faith, and pretty much everything in between.
Every week, we sit down together for real conversations about the issues shaping our world.
I'm Alexis Confer, artist, political organizer, and lover of a deep dive.
And I'm Iffy Ike, lawyer, author, and perpetual question asker. This is The
This is the
Carpenter's
Carpenter's Daughter. Let's get into it.
Daughter. Okay, Alexis, how are you?
Doing great, Iffy. I'm doing great. I'm excited about our special episode here.
We are, as we're waiting for our guests to join us, first of all, I love this aesthetic you're giving us. Very Mamma Mia. Is that the right?
It is, it is like
Very, very,
any comparison to Meryl Streep is a good day for me. When
I
she,
would take it.
Mamma Mia, yeah. I was just feeling these. I got these in Italy, a little vintage shop. Thank you. I found my Alexis necklace. I'm really in my ethos. Where
Yeah.
are you coming to us from? Your home?
You said what? I'm sorry.
Tell us more about where you're coming to us today from. Your home? I heard Bishop.
Oh, well, I think we're both kind of in the out of studio. This is not coming for us, but first of all, we had an amazing first season,
Yeah.
and it just feels like as we were trying to wrap up the season, the world was worlding. So we wanted to. This is a bonus episode that allows us to kind of speak to the moment that we're at. And we're super excited about this conversation. And I guess I want to get a sense as to like, how are you feeling
Mhm.
in this moment? How's your light
Oh, thank
this
you.
moment?
I will say, like, doing this with you and I just got back from a nice trip with my family to DC. Like, I've been saying personally I'm doing well, but existentially very bad. I just it starts making you feel a little conflicted to even have joys in certain days when it's just like everything feels so heavy and so many people are hurting so much. So I don't know. I'm doing okay personally, but yeah, every day I'm doom scrolling something. I watched that Netflix Manosphere documentary last night. I
Nice.
keep myself educated on what's going on in the world, and that just kind of throws me into a really perplexing, tough mindset. I mean, I don't know. What about you?
Yeah. So I did see that. I did see that documentary. But let me speak to my light at the moment. There has always been a perpetual feeling of, I think the closest thing to it would be that term kind of like survivor's guilt or survivor's remorse, right? This feeling of, oh, I'm feeling joyful in this moment, but just as quickly feeling the weight of everything that's happening. That's always actually been an issue for me ever since I was a kid. And I do think some of it is that I am an empath, but I do think it's really important for me to remember that like joy is a birthright, and in those moments where I don't have to think about it and I feel great not because I'm like pretending to feel great or I'm putting on for anyone. Like I feel great because my body and my cells and
Yeah.
the situation and the environment is aligning with me in the moment. And while it is really, really hard to hold with the fact that there are probably longer periods of peace that I'm experiencing that I know other people are not experiencing right now.
Right.
In my prayers around where other people are at, I do also I do also hold that they too have joy and that they also deserve peace, right? And so I think we wouldn't be human and we definitely wouldn't be people that followed one who sacrificed to ensure that people were seen, had what they needed. It makes sense for us to feel. And so I hold the both and of like, I it would be against my being to stay in a space of guilt. But in those moments when I do feel the sharpness of the joy, and may I also add the privilege at times to be in joyful states, I'm also very grateful, right? That I'm able to like I have to remind myself that I don't just have joy, like I'm a joyful person and
Yeah.
that people are joyful.
Yeah. And that's what I mean, honestly, this podcast and for those who've listened to us for these last episodes.
Hey moms.
Yeah, hey, hey, mom, hey, Dean, hey, hey, Laura, all the people came on. Um, yeah, this has given me joy, and this has given me also, I feel like I have busy hands. I always, like, need to be getting into this stuff. I feel like you're like this too, and it just gives me yet another vehicle to help in this moment, even if, once again, it's our moms listening. How are we starting to get people to, like, demonstrate these conversations? So when you and I were like, "We have to talk about what's happening in Iran," it felt like an incredible privilege to be able to say to hop on with, like, one of my co-collaborators, co-conspirators, friends, and just be like, "Oh," and we're both like, "Let's get into it. Like, let's work on this right now," and have that, that platform to do so. That feels really meaningful to me because prior to even doing the podcast, you're a person who I would call if shit was hitting the fan, or like
Mhm.
or to help unpack what's going on in the world. I've called you many times to be like, let's hash it out. And
Thank God for voice notes. We definitely use
yeah,
them.
I don't think I even knew how to do voice notes until
We started to
you
use
brought it to my front door.
now we can't rip the baby out our hands.
Well, that's one thing the audience doesn't know. You know, there's this big debate amongst millennials, Gen Z, et cetera. Like, do you do voice memos? Do you do voicemails? And I feel like voice memos to me are the perfect medium between a phone call that you maybe don't have time for and the text.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You're a
yeah.
friend of mine that I'm just really so thrilled that she was able to make the time to meet with us. Our first West Coast, I guess, as well. I should mention. So we are coming to you from different locations, different homes. But Maryam Mehrtash and I met several months ago. We're on the board of Waterwell Theater Company and became instant friends. We went to a Malala event together, one of our first times meeting, and just really bonded on all things creative and how we can make an impact. Miriam has an incredible background. I was going to get into this a little bit before we go fully into the episode rundown, but she's a global entertainment marketing executive. She's worked for Paramount, CBS, Disney, Marvel. Maybe you've heard of a few of these things. She's the writer of This Is Not a Memo Substack, and I will say watching her social media presence the last couple of weeks has really encouraged me to step my game up a little bit as well. She's really doing so well. She focuses on courageous leadership, reinvention, asking the hard questions. She's a mom of two incredibly adorable kids I'm looking forward to meet in real life one day, and she's a board member of Waterwell and the Pro Human Foundation, and I'm just so happy you're here today, Mariam. I have a lot of respect for what you're doing and how you're really telling the story of your homeland, which we'll get into in a few minutes. But first off, how are you doing today? Welcome to the Carpenter
Thank
Daughter.
you. Thank you so much, Alexis, Effie. This is the first time we're meeting, so thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. We're both on the board of Waterwell, and I just want to talk about how important the work is that Waterwell is doing. It's a perfect example of how art can wrestle with big civic questions, which is something that I know we're going to get into today as we talk about Iran. But do want to highlight the work of Waterwell as well, because I know it's important for both of us. I'm excited for all our events and initiatives that are coming up. So to the audience, please make sure to check out Waterwell. I'm doing well. Today is Persian New Year.
Happy New Year. What are you doing to celebrate with family and friends? Anything this weekend?
Well, today we're gonna have family dinner. My mom is gonna make poda sabzi, which is the traditional Persian dish. It's rice and herbs with fish. I have some friends and relatives coming over, and it's obviously a different kind of New Year. It's one that is marked with grief and hope with what's going on right now in Iran. Feels heavier than in other years. We had a chance this morning to speak to my family in Iran, which was really nice. They called us. There's been an internet blackout for most of the year in Iran since the protests and the revolution happened. But when they are able to call us, they're able to just let us know that they're doing okay. They can't really say much because if they do get into too much of what's happening, they will disconnect the call. And most of people are calling through secured VPNs that aren't really that secure. It was nice to hear their voice and hear them be hopeful despite everything that is going on in the country.
Well, and I have to tell you, I know you've been holding so much, and to have family spread across multiple continents and being kind of a rock of pushing out communication must be incredibly heavy. So I think we're particularly grateful to you on the day of the new year with everything going on, taking the time to speak with us and carving out that space. I think we really miss having truthful storytellers out there who are willing to highlight what's really happening on the ground anywhere. And so I think the way you've been vulnerable in yourself and showing what's happening to your family and to the history you come from must be particularly heavy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I started talking about Iran because it was important for me to provide context. I saw a lot of misinformation out there around the protests and the revolution and the history of our people. And for me, really, I'm being a voice for them. I want to amplify the story of the voices in Iran. And part of me being able to share my family story is a way of me honoring their struggle and what they're going through. And then also, again, in a world of misinformation and so many different viewpoints out there, I want to be able to be a voice that is grounded in truth and facts and honoring context and critical thinking, something that I don't see a lot of happening on the internet, unfortunately. And that's something that's important to me. So I've been using my voice and my platform to help inform people. And, we're all human. We're not always going to get things right. There's going to be people who disagree with the way you narrate something or inform. But all I can do is do my best to be a source of information and a voice for their struggle because they don't have a voice right now. And they haven't really had a voice for 47 years. And the internet blackout is not helping get information out, and they have to risk their lives to get information out. So that's why you're seeing so many people within the diaspora who do have family members and speaking out against the situation that's happening.
Yeah, I wanna build upon that. There's a normal format that we have, which is like a normal flow. But we're doing this bonus episode out of studio because of that reason, right? There are a lot of people, whether informed or not informed, that are speaking out. And Alexis and I were not sure how many spaces were really leaving room open for Iranians to self-determine for themselves and to share what's going on. And you have a little story to share a little bit. Your family knows a little bit about not just current conflict, but kind of the longer arc of how we've somewhat arrived today. So to the extent that you feel comfortable, would just love to hear a little bit more about, your connection to Iran, your family's homeland, just the journey outside of what's happening today, which I think is also important to put into context.
So I feel that my story is the story of millions of Iranians. My parents fled Iran after the 1979 revolution during the Iran-Iraq War. And a lot of people who you probably know or speak to within the diaspora have a very similar story. I left when I was 2 years old. The part where my story may differ is the how we got here, because everyone has their own unique version of fleeing the country and how they arrived to whether it was Europe, America, Canada, or wherever else they went. For us, when I was 2 years old, we were fleeing the country and my dad had already left prior to my mom and I. My mom and I got on a train to go meet my father in Eastern Europe. And my mother, who was in her early 20s at the time, got off on the wrong train station and we were then thrown in refugee camps for months. It took a little time for my father to find us. We eventually met up with him and we were able to immigrate to Canada, and that's where I grew up. I am a first generation immigrant. The story that really truly shaped me, though, growing up is my grandmother's story. She was a political prisoner in the Islamic Republic's infamous Evin Prison, and you might have heard about Evin Prison on social media as of late because of all of the people who were detained and who have been executed since the protests that happened in January. My grandmother was a Kurdish singer, actress, and activist. She was a fierce, fierce free spirit and a real force. And for being an activist and being Kurdish and being an artist is the reason why she became a political prisoner and she was raped and tortured for 4 years. Her crime was her voice, her art, and her identity. And again, her story is not even that unique. It's a story of so many political prisoners that are even today going through that. It's really a story of a regime that has tried to silence people for the past 47 years. And her resilience and her survival and her courage is the legacy that I'm trying to carry on. And sorry,
Well, no. And what's your grandmother's name? I want to know.
her name is Giti. She actually left us a few years ago. When the revolution started in Iran in early January, I really wish that she was here just to see the bravery and the courage of the people and the resistance and the fight for freedom that the country is currently going through.
And Mariam, it's so beautiful to hear you talk about your grandmother though, and also like how you found your place also in the arts or adjacent to the arts. I think that like we talk a lot about on this podcast that artists really are activists and frontline and artists are kind of the revolutionaries you need and the creatives that have started so many positive changes in society over the years. So it's really, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I truly believe that art is resistance. I mean, if you look at so many different periods of revolution and fighting against resistance and oppression, some of the most beautiful and most historically famous pieces of art have come through that. And it's a way to express yourself against tyranny, against oppression, against fear. Yes, I probably get that from her.
I wanted to build upon the you were talking about the resistance in January, and this is in many ways for some people this is a new conversation. So, do you mind sharing some context for folks as to what are some of the developments that we should also be keeping in mind of that maybe we're not as aware of? Iranian voices aren't at the forefront of communicating their own history and their own activism in the mainstream media.
One thing I hope the audience takes away from this that the resistance isn't new. What is happening right now isn't new. It's unprecedented in the sense that this has been the largest mass protest that happened in early January, and I'll get to that in a second. But I do want to preface it with the resistance has been happening for the past 47 years. The first women's march against the hijab was in March 1979. And the killings of protesters is something that has been happening for the last 4 decades. Every couple of years, there is an uprising. There was the Green Revolution that happened in 2009. There's been protests that has happened because of student and university uprisings. Every couple of years, I feel that the people amp up their courage to go back out and fight against the regime. And every single time, the playbook is internet blackout, to shoot, to kill people, to detain them, to torture them. What makes this time different is this is the largest one that's happened. But the resistance and the protests have been happening for every couple of years. And the people have been trying to free themselves from this regime for the past 47 years. I think that's really important context because, I have been vocal on social media by providing information and what's happening. And I have seen comments of, well, the Iranian people need to free themselves, or why don't they fight for themselves? And the truth is that they have tried to resist and they have tried to fight, and they've been met with death, oppression, and executions. This time it was different. The most recent wave was a nationwide protest that happened on December 28th, 2025. It began in the bazaars, and the bazaars are the shops in Tehran, the economic heart of the country, and they went on strike because they couldn't afford to live anymore. The government has completely mismanaged the economy. Inflation is out of control. It's at an all-time high. The currency has lost almost all of its value against the dollar, and the repression has been suffocating. So people are really suffering, and the living conditions economically and oppression wise, it's not sustainable. And a lot of people, even though they knew that if they went out and protest, they could die or they could get executed, they felt that there's nothing for them to live for anymore. And that's the desperation that the people have gotten to at this point in time. The protests spread to almost every city and province across the entire country, and the regime's response was also unprecedented. On January 8th and 9th of 2026, they unleashed a massacre using military grade weapons on unarmed civilians. And they killed tens of thousands. And I know there's a lot of controversy around what the exact number is. Regime officials have one number that they say, human rights organizations have a number, the US has a number, but it is in the tens of thousands. President Trump said that the numbers were over 36,000. It was a bloodbath over 2 days. It was the biggest massacre over a 2-day period in our modern history by their own government. This was followed by weeks of internet blackout to hide the atrocities. There's been a tsunami of mass arrests. Tens of thousands of people have been detained, tortured, and subjected to sham trials where they don't actually get any due process. Many accounts of women who have been gang raped. Nurses were detained and raped for providing medical care to protesters who had been shot, because there was also accounts of people who had been shot who went to go seek medical care at hospitals, they were going and threatening the doctors and telling the doctors that they would be detained and executed if they helped care for protesters who had been seeking medical attention. And then there's also been executions from what we know from human rights reports groups. The Human Rights Center for Iran has stated that 552 executions have happened. We believe, obviously, it's probably more than that, but that's what's on record so far for this year alone, just over a 2.5 month period. Just yesterday, we heard about the executions of 3 more young men who were teenagers, 19 years old. One of them was Saleh Mohammadi. You might have seen his name all over the internet because so many people were posting about him. He was a wrestling champion, a kid with his whole life ahead of him who was hanged publicly for protesting. And then now, on top of all of that, now the country is embroiled in war. So it's this perfect storm of just continuous suffering, and the people are stuck between repression and bombs, which is completely devastating.
Yeah, my family, my parents are from Nigeria, and I think that it's a unique space to have historical truths existing at the same time, where ongoing conflicts that oftentimes are interregion, like within people's homelands, require attention, focus, intervention even. And people have been organizing for so long. And I do think that's an important message to get out, that people have not been sitting back waiting for a liberator or even waiting for anyone outside of themselves, right? But what we do also recognize is that in a world that does have at least a hope of human rights sanctions or human rights realities to be recognized, that when communities are articulating the atrocities that they have endured, such as you have and you are on behalf of your people, it is not to say that people can't have opinions around current dynamics of what's going on the ground, but it is to also ensure that we are not dismissing the self determination attempts and some successes, but unfortunately, a lot of reproach and abuses that have happened towards individuals that have been fighting for liberation as young as 19 and even younger. So many, especially as when it comes to young women and girls, so many of them we don't even know their names, right? I went to a law school that focuses on public, really civil and human rights as the crux of our practice. So the 1979 women's demonstration in Iran is something that I see as in many ways as like they were somewhat ahead of their time, if you will, and a model globally. And in many ways, the land is still paying for that. I honor what you were saying. I wouldn't be me if I said I raised my family being from Nigeria largely because I do also hold that it can be. I am saddened at times, and maybe it's just me, I'm speaking for myself. I get skeptical as to what happens when individuals and or nations outside of our country are telling the story or even in the area because people do need support and help. And there's also room to question, is this the right way? Is this the right support? But I do, part of the reason why we wanted to have this space is, but we still have to have equal, and if in many ways, more space and deference also needs to be given to people that are impacted by this. And so I thank you for the education that you're even providing me in this moment as I'm sitting with my conflicts of like knowing a little bit about what it's like to have family members in a region where some of these things are happening, definitely not to this scale, but have happened. And sometimes it is in those moments that on a mass scale, on a media level, that the rest of the world gets brought into the longer runway of histories that but for these type of conflicts many people would not know about. So it's a tense way to think about it, or at least for me in my mind. There is a bit of a dissonance there, but I want to stress that it is not to talk about the right or wrongfulness of like a conflict today. It is actually to highlight that this isn't new and this has been going on. Yeah.
Yeah, and the people have been trying to fight in the best way that they could against a regime for 47 years. Like I said, this is an unprecedented moment because of the level of the mass massacres that happened on January 8th and 9th. But also, until the war started, a lot of people, to my surprise, didn't even know what happened on January 8 and 9. And I think that that is so interesting. Part of the reason why I started using my platform and sharing my family story of what was happening in Iran is because there was so many people who didn't know what was happening. The media wasn't covering it. So one of the ways for us in the Iranian diaspora to get the message out of the massacres and to provide context on what was happening on the ground was to use our platforms.
There's been so much conversation, Mariam, about free Iran. There's a lot of like bold signs and posters, and a lot of times it's kind of thrown as a talking point in whatever social media commentator is saying it. What would it look like to free Iran? Like how do we even get to a free Iran from and I realize this is your perspective. When I hear the entire history you're saying and these multiple attempts to kind of get past that moment, it can feel very dark. But I know a lot of people have also been thinking about what could you aspirationally do? How could you actually have a world in which the women, like when you see the epic pictures from prior to this regime of how women were ahead of the curve in so many ways in Iran, from the high education of women in Iran and the kind of the cosmopolitan way in which Iranian women were even dressing and being out in the world. I mean, there was just so much incredible depth of culture there for millennial, but also even in modern history. So what is a free Iran like?
Yeah, you touched on one point about education, and I just did a video about this. And I want to say that even under the regime, the literacy rate in Iran is 99%, and the youth literacy rate, even today. And when it comes to education, the women make up 60% of post secondary graduates and 70% of STEM. So, in terms of science and engineering and educating themselves, they've continued to do that. And the rates have actually even been higher since 1979. One of the reasons, though, for that is because getting an education and becoming a specialist is one of the only ways out of the country. It's one of the only ways that you can attain a visa and you're able to get out. That 25% of the educated population in Iran live abroad. So many of them have tried to be able to get their specialty degrees so that other countries will take them. I just wanted to point that out because the country is highly educated even today, and we have one of the most highly educated populations in the world, despite the repression and the
I'm glad you called that out because I think there's a lot of just very shallow and kind of misguided just talking points and talking heads on mainstream media outlets right now about kind of lumping one region all together. We see that happen a lot. A lot of kind of ill-educated, uneducated commentators being online and talking about acting like it's a world, like a country that does not have education, et cetera, when we know it's probably a higher literacy rate than the United States of America by quite a bit. So I really appreciate you naming that.
I will also, Alexis, just touch that because I've had a lot of comments on that video about people saying, well, because it's also economic sanctions and because of the economy, and that's why people leave. And I think you can hold both truths. Obviously, the economy being the way it is in Iran doesn't help the youth feel that they have a future there when people are going to get degrees and an engineer's salary doesn't even cover their rent for the month. Like, make that make sense. And that's really what got us to the tipping point in December when the bazaar broke out. But it's also the regime mismanaging the economy as well. I think all of those things we can hold space for, and there's truths in all of them. But when it comes to having a future for the youth don't believe they have a future there under the economic and repressiveness of the regime. And that's why their education is an act of resistance, so that they can have hope to leave the country and have a better future. But you asked me, what does a free Iran look like from my perspective? I just want to say that my perspective is always a human one. It's always about human rights. It's about freedom, the same freedoms that you and I enjoy right here in America. The freedom to speak without fear, like we're doing right now, the freedom to choose your own leaders, the freedom for women to walk down the street to wear what you want without being controlled by the state. That's really what a free Iran, from my perspective, means. I believe from what I have heard from voices in Iran, when they want the regime gone or they're saying death to the dictator, they want to have an Iran where the country and the people have the freedom to choose their own fate. A secular democracy where your religion, your gender, your ethnicity doesn't determine your rights, and a place where a young girl can dream about being a singer and being able to sing solo in public, which is illegal in Iran now under the Islamic regime, like my grandmother, without fear of being imprisoned. It's not a radical vision. It's the most normal vision that the world should look like. It's about basic freedom and basic human rights. And that's what I believe a free Iran could look like and what people want.
What I respect so much about what you're sharing, two things. The first is, in many ways, it's always a great reminder that a lot of the struggles throughout the globe are interconnected, right? That this is actually the fight that majority of human beings desire for themselves, and it is their birthright to do all of the things that you stated, right? And many cultures and I have no problem saying, even here in America, while it fares better in comparison with a lot of other cultures and countries, there are many people here that are also looking to exercise those freedoms. And that's important. That's not a either or. That's important, I think, for us to start looking at what does it look like for us to have spaces like this where we can hear from each other, where the similarities are? What does it look like for us to learn from individuals like your grandmother and like our foremothers and our forefathers that have been a part of conflicts, and many of them have died as a result of just living for humanity and liberation. And it leads to my second part, which is part of the reason why we started the Carpenter's Daughter, is that while both Alexis and I are individuals that identify as people of faith, we also recognize that there is a usage of religion and or in this space Christian nationalism that is used as a way to represent the region as a whole, Americans as a whole. And that is important to highlight, right? That it is not even about one particular faith. It is the way faith is used in the extreme versions to even put individuals that want both, right? A conversation with their creator as well, the ability to create. And what does it mean when those things get manipulated by governments and regimes that oftentimes do not have our best interest at heart? May I also add, I mean, I'm thinking of some areas in the Caribbean, like Trinidad, for example, also over 90% literacy rate, but also a poor economy. Mm, juxtaposed with the United States, always talking about the Dow and always talking about the economics, but we still have over 40% of individuals that read below a fourth grade level, right? So it's also really important for us to think about like what does it mean to be whole and human, but what does it also mean to be rich and wealthy? What does it mean to have an education as a tool to lead? That's a deep narrative that I think transcends multiple spaces. And I just appreciate you sharing how one human experience, a human people that I think a lot of us can relate to that struggle, even here within the United States, that proclaims these freedoms, yet at times, many times, depending on who you are, is not necessarily invested in making sure that it is true for everyone. And that is a shared struggle. I appreciate you sharing.
You said something that I just wanted to touch on a little bit is empathy and listening to each other and hearing each other's stories. I think that is so important. Part of the work that I'm trying to do with Pro Human Foundation, even with Waterwell, but even just myself using my Substack and my platform, is to create spaces and conversations where people have more of a capacity to hear each other out and to hear individual stories. I want to share a little story about Pro Human Foundation. I've recently joined the board. And one of the co founders, Daryl Davis, I just had my onboarding intro call and he shared a bit of his history and why he started Pro Human Foundation. Daryl is a Black musician who spent decades befriending members of the KKK. He doesn't argue with them, he sits down with them and he listens to them. He finds their shared humanity. And because of the work that he's been doing over several decades now, he has been direct or indirect cause of over 200 men leaving the KKK. And his work is so profound because it's rooted in humanity. It's rooted in being pro-human. And what he explained to me about pro-human, which I really resonated with, is that we spend so much time arguing about things that we are against. Right? I'm against this. I'm anti-racism. I'm anti-war. I'm anti-this. Instead of really listening to each other and our lived experiences and talking about things that we are pro. So when you ask me that question, what does a free Iran look like? I don't know if you realize, but I said my perspective is pro-human. It's pro-freedom. It's pro. I didn't sit here and get into all of my opinions of things that I'm against. I talked about the things that I am for, and I hope and I know that the people of Iran are for. And I think that perspective is really important to really unite our shared humanity, because when you start to talk about the positive things, the things that you are for, then other people start to wrap their head around, like, we may come from different backgrounds or different religions or different belief systems, but this shared proness unites us. I wanted to share that story because I think in the context of what's happening in the world right now, not just in Iran, but in the United States, as you said, I think that starting to listen and have respect for each other's experiences and focusing on the positive, what unites us versus what divides us, is really important right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And you've mentioned a couple dope organizations so far. You've mentioned Orwell, you mentioned Pro-Human. Are there other, we call them salts of the earth? Like, are there other people, loved ones, organizations, just like anyone else that you feel like you want to give a shout out that's like people should either pay attention to or that have really impacted your calling, who you are, or how you see the world? I'm just curious to see who your salts of the earth are.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many people. My Substack, this is not a memo. I write about courage and reinvention and leadership and asking hard questions and critical thinking. A lot of the people who shaped and inspired my writings are people like Brene Brown and Mel Robbins and Adam Grant. They're doing human work. They're really asking those hard questions, and they're looking at society and corporations and our human experience in different angles. The Simon Sinek's, the why, those are the people who have inspired me in my work and who feel carpenters or salt of the earth when it comes to championing that type of work. But again, to go back to Daryl Davis, I think the work that he's doing really is a representation of a radical act of carpentry as well. I believe that people who are salt of the earth, they see individuals beyond the labels. When you can see individuals beyond labels is when you can really build bridges of understanding instead of walls of opposition. And all of those people that I've named, I believe from their work, view the world that way. Again, just a simple act of seeing each other's humanity.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I wanna then think about what's next. Right? We are in the midst of this conflict. It feels like it's everybody's war if you because in many ways it's all encompassing conversations. But when you think about, you have this vision that's there, what feels like the path forward and maybe a step forward. I think path may be a lot. And but if you were asked like what is the path forward for Iran, but also for humanity, like what would your answer to that be?
I guess I'll start with Iran, and it's really not an easy answer. It's complex because there are so many differing views and opinions about what the path forward should be. And I don't believe at this time we really know what that looks like. I think that the reality is we are in the middle of a war. Of course, there are people who are against the war, there are people who are for it. And there's a lot of opinions on both sides of the spectrum. Again, going back to my answer about freedom, right? The majority of people of Iran want freedom for their country and they want a democracy and a secular government. The path of getting there, whether it's within the diaspora outside of Iran or even within Iran, is challenging to name at this time because Iran and its people are not a monolith. Iran is comprised of 40% of ethnic minorities, different religions, Christians, Jews, Baha'is, Zoroastrians, Assyrians, Kurds. There's so many different ethnicities and religions within Iran and even within the diaspora outside of Iran. So everyone has a different ideology in terms of the perspective of how do we get there and then what does it look like once we get there? What does the formation of the government or state look like? People have different perspectives on that too. But what I will say, and it's crucial to understand, is that the majority of people, what we are united on, what our shared humanity from what I've seen and what we do agree on is that most people want the regime gone and they want an end to the brutal dictatorship and theocracy of what is currently encompassing the country. And they want freedom for the people. The people, they are stuck right now between an impossible situation of repression and war. I will say that the part where they are united and in their shared humanity is that they want this regime gone and they want an end to this brutal dictatorship and this theocracy. They want freedom for the people. They are stuck between a regime that will execute them if they go out in the streets and they protest and they try to fight, and the bombs that they have no control over that are falling across the country. And I've seen and heard accounts of people in Iran, of voices from Iran, not within the diaspora, but people who have sent voice notes that are encrypted, who have sent messages to their family members and have asked those family members to put them on social media. I've seen those and I've heard their voices, and some of them are saying that they are terrified of the regime and they are terrified of the bombs. Some are saying that they are terrified that if the war ends now, they feel that they're going to be stuck with the same regime that massacred the tens of thousands of people in January. They're scared that if the war continues to go, we're not going to have a homeland left because it's going to be flattened. There has been reports of bombs hitting heritage sites. People are devastated about that. And that's something that on a day-to-day basis, we are all grappling with. We're grappling with the realities of what a war means. It means destruction. And we're also grappling with the reality of what does it mean if the war ends and how do we move forward with a regime that is going to continue to oppress and execute and try the people who spoke up. You have to also remember that they're in an internet blackout and they have no communication to the world. Even their thoughts and their voices out in terms of what they're feeling right now is risking their lives. So it's a very complicated situation. It's devastating and heartbreaking from all angles. And I think that the diaspora also holds on to a lot of guilt. I think that a lot of people who live outside of Iran feel that they were the lucky ones. They were the ones who got out. And I would be lying to you if I told you that I don't think about that for myself and for my family. And 95% of my family lives there, and I worry about a bomb hitting their building. But I also worried about them when the protests happened. And I didn't know once the internet connected if I was going to get a phone call saying that one of my cousins died, or because they're considered part of the generation that has that relentless bravery to go out there and to resist. I'm scared. And I know a lot of people in the diaspora feel like this. I'm scared of what the message you're going to get once the internet connects or once you get that phone call is going to be. And we all hold that grief also from a place of guilt, a lot of us. There's a lot of people in the diaspora who were born in America or Canada or Europe or wherever, but there's a lot of us like me who were born there and our parents fought to flee for our future, for our safety. And when I talked to my father about that time, when my mother got pregnant, he made it his mission to get out of the country because once he saw what the Islamic Republic was, what life under the Islamic Republic was for a daughter, he couldn't bear to stay in a country where he knew his daughter, who wasn't even born yet at the time, wouldn't have a life in the future. And that is a reality. And that's why he fought to leave. He didn't fight to leave for himself. He fought to leave for me. And the guilt of knowing that all of my other female cousins, and the men are repressed there as well, but the guilt of knowing that I'm the only one that got out. I'm the only female cousin that got out.
Maryam, I thank you. I mean, before we started recording today, Iffy and I were talking about survivor guilt is a real thing. We literally were just talking about that.
Yeah.
We hold you in so much love and grace. I mean, you being with us in community and you using your voice to speak on behalf of your cousins is just really brave and incredible. And we hold you with a lot of love and grace and send you
Thank
so much
you.
support because that's a very heavy thing to carry each and every day too, and not know what's happening to your loved ones. And I can't even imagine the blackout component of it alone must be just complete anxiety inducing. So we're going to be holding them in a lot of prayer and thought.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And one to say you were all fighting, right? It's important for them to also know that, like, physically, you're in a different location, but you're not out. And that's why you're using your platform. And that's why you're here. And you are all deserving of joy. And you are all deserving of this new year. And with the time that we have on earth to see how you are using the highest and best use of the space that you have to do what you can for liberation is humanity. Right? Humanity is not about superheroes, although sometimes we want to be one. It's not about, I know you know a lot about Marvel and about like supernatural things, but what captivates people even with those stories is that it's actually everyday flawed people doing the best they can. That's right. To just make sure that the next person has a little bit more than what they had the day before, even at risk to themselves. Right. So I honor that you are not doing this riskless and could be doing a whole bunch of other things in light of the fact that you're not there, but you're with them. And we just thank you for the way that you are also extending your salt across as well. I want to just hear if there's anything you said a lot that I think folks can already take away from. Want to give you an opportunity to, we call this part, do this in remembrance. Again, we some church girls over here. Yeah, Bella, still do this in remembrance of me, right? Like
Yeah.
we think of it as like, what's the takeaway and what is the thing people to remember or even to your family? Like, what do you want to share at this moment that we can all just leave with?
I think it would be this. Become a conscious consumer of information. We're living in a time of misinformation bubble, which I think is so dangerous during times of conflict, especially in war. Propaganda is at an all-time high. Social media algorithms are designed to feed you what you already believe, right? Your ideologies, your perspective. It's called groupthink, and it's incredibly dangerous. The most important skill and the most important thing every single one of us can do right now to fight against that is to develop media literacy and not to just read the headline, but to ask questions and to think critically. Who is the source? What is their agenda? Who benefits from me believing this narrative? Read opposing viewpoints, expand your perspective, follow journalists and activists who are on the ground, who have access to real voices, who are unbiased. Expand your view to multiple perspectives and news sources, not just one. And if you do see a video from Iran, don't just see what is happening today, not just what's happening today, but remember the global frame of things and the history of things. And remember that this fight didn't just happen or start in January. It's been decades in the making. And see the 19-year-old wrestler who was just executed yesterday. Don't just look at the headline, but actually see him, see the grandmother who was jailed for singing, see the humanity and the stories of the real people behind those headlines. And the information war, like I said, it's real. It's going to only get worse with the use of AI and AI images. And the only way for us to fight this as a global collective, not to get dramatic, but for humanity, for the good of humanity, is to think for yourself and critical thinking to be a part of your skill set that you work on daily and actively.
Thank you so much for putting the responsibility back on us. It's actually not the time to be apathetic at all. And so we take that charge seriously. I wouldn't expect anything less from a communications professional.
That's right.
To get on our P's and Q's, and he wiped them tears and was like, y'all need to get to work. Y'all need to stop playing around over here. Stop sharing those fake memes, fake news. Stop doing it.
It's so true. It's so damaging, so dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miriam, thank you. What?
And can I just say one more thing to the audience?
Yes, please.
Go to my Substack. I do
Oh, that's
offer
yeah.
a lot of tips and tools on how to think critically, on how to ask good and hard questions, on how to be a courageous leader within your community, whether that's church or corporate or within your family. I offer a lot of tips and resources. Everything I write is verified and I use sources that are accredited. So you can trust when you read me, I promise.
We know it. We know it. Miriam, thank you. Like I'm so grateful to you. It's been such a wonderful conversation. There's so much more to unpack, and we should definitely push out updates as you have them to our community as well. We want to be really helpful carpenters and what you're trying to build. Well, that is our show for today. Yeah.
I just said thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for holding a safe space to have this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. It's our honor. Well, we're going to thank our audience for spending time with us and for being part of this growing community.
Please just keep asking questions. As Maryam said, keep verifying information and please take care of yourself and just keep showing up with intention.
And we'll be back next season with more conversation, more curiosity, and more light.
Yes, child, we need a break. So until then,
Congratulations on your first season.
thank you.
Congrats. Awesome.
We are so excited. Thank you, Maryam. No more bonus specials, Alexis. I think this is a wrap. So we'll see you next time
On The Carpenter's Daughter.